Good evening, everybody. My name is Christina Wigren, and I am with Stilly Valley Health Connections. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for tonight's class, which is focused on how to reset when stressed. For everyone who is joining us live, please note that this class is set up in a Zoom webinar format. This means that all participants are muted and your videos are turned off so that we can record this presentation. If at any point you have any questions, you can send those to us through the chat box or the Q&A. Now I will pass it over to Camille Harris of the Women and Family Wellness Studio, who will be presenting on tonight's topic. Thank you, Camille, for being here, and thank you to everyone who has joined us so far. We hope that you enjoyed this program.
Thanks, Christina. Hi, everybody. So glad you're here. We're going to be talking about how to reset when stressed. So I'm your presenter, Camille Harris. I've been a counselor for over a decade, working primarily with women, children, and families in social services. I own a behavioral health practice in Snohomish County called Women and Family Wellness Studio, and we offer counseling, evidence-based parenting classes, in-home postpartum support, and workshops on adult wellness and all things parenting. So our agenda for today, we're going to cover how to identify stressors, triggers, talking about emotional intelligence. What does that feel like in the body? What does that look like? And then we're going to review how to come up with a wellness plan to combat stress. We're going to compare the differences between self-care and self-soothing, and then do some practice exercises. So we first want to identify stressors. Most people know what feels stressful for them, but we want to talk about what happens in the body and what different kinds of reactions we can have in our body when we have stressors. So stressors are external, internal events or perceived threats that cause a physical or physiological response in the body. And we can experience this from both good and bad stress. So some examples of good stress might be if you have a baby, your child's first day of kindergarten or preschool or any new school, first day at a new job, or giving a presentation like this one. Bad stress examples could be being fired from a job, your bank account is overextended, a loved one is in the hospital because they're not doing well, or your child's school calls to share bad news. If you're a parent, you always know it's really unnerving when you get that phone call from the school. I am a parent of 3 kids. So the physiological response when we have these stressful events is often felt in our bodies, and it causes either a fight or flight reaction, a fawn reaction, or freeze reaction within the body. So, first we want to talk about what happens when we have that fight or flight feeling. So this is something that we can physically feel happening. And then people can also, not always, but sometimes see it happening. They'll see like our dilated pupils, we look pale or flushed. Oftentimes there's like this minor shaking or, more violent shaking that happens. Really rapid heartbeat starts to happen, and our breathing can change. So this is when our body is preparing for feeling like it needs immediate action to be taken. We're on high alert, and the central nervous system really starts to ramp up. So this is what we call the alarm stage, and our bodies are trying to bring itself back to balance and recover from that initial elevated fight or flight response. This is what we call the resistance phase. And then if the body remains in fight or flight for extended periods of time, over and over, like when you're in chronic stress, there will then be a recovery period, appropriately called the exhaustion phase. And sometimes people can still have that recovery period after an isolated incident of high stress, where you just have that like just total exhaustion after your body has come back down to a baseline, and that perceived threat or that very real threat is gone. And so these actual changes that are occurring in our brains and in our bodies to let us know that, like, hey, this is happening from this stressful event. And typically this is a uncomfortable feeling, and we're aware that we're in that space. And then some people can also have what's called a fawn response. So it's also referred to as please and appease phase because it involves a lot of people pleasing to reduce those uncomfortable feelings that come with a stressful event, rather than acting on what is best for your needs to get you out of that state. And people will do this to minimize the distress that they're currently under, and in an attempt to, it doesn't necessarily achieve that. And this can definitely be a trauma response that people learn over time. Some examples, or an example would be if someone is in an abusive home growing up, or a home where there's a parent that's always yelling or intoxicated, often under the influence, that child will learn it causes less stir, so to speak, to just be that fawning response and that people pleasing. So other indicators of fawning would be inability to say no to others, total neglect of one's own personal needs and boundaries, unaware of your own feelings, make yourself completely available to others, regardless of what your own needs are, and looking for others to tell you how you should feel. And so it's really less connected to what is your internal state needing, but more how do I help control these outside things to make the outside world feel more comfortable, in hopes that it'll just make that stress go away. So as I mentioned earlier, people that grow up in homes where there's a lot of chaos and unpredictability, this will become an adaptive behavior over time. And then the last response we can have is freeze. So when this happens, our prefrontal cortex goes basically offline. You involuntarily lose function of it. And your prefrontal cortex is responsible for your reasoning, your judgment, your ability to analyze the situation and make good logical decisions. And the body does this instinctively to protect itself. And so we're not able to control when this happens. We just totally freeze. Like we can't do those actions we would need to maybe get us out of a difficult or dangerous situation. And so the prefrontal cortex is right where your forehead is and your brain. And it's the last part of the brain to fully develop. It's not fully developed until around 25 years old. That's oftentimes why we see teenagers that really struggle with that reasoning, having good judgment, making good decisions, because that part of the brain is still developing. And so if you're a younger adult, then when you're going into this freeze state, it might even be more debilitating than someone who's a little bit older and that prefrontal cortex is completely developed. So when we're in this freeze state, it's going to feel like you are detached from the situation. You're feeling dread from what's going on. There's a numbness or emotional flatness, like you're not reacting and responding how you normally would. There can definitely be increased anxiety with all of them, but certainly with this, because there's a panic that's setting in because you can't respond. Oftentimes people would feel stuck, numbness or coldness, holding their breath or just really shallow breaths, or breathing less. So a lot of times people will notice that, like, they just do a lot of like sighing because they're not fully expanding their lungs when they're breathing. That's the parasympathetic nervous system trying to get back online. Feeling like you're in a fog, can't think clearly, disassociation or lack of sense of reality. Your mind goes blank or you have racing thoughts. And so if someone's in a chronic, constant state of stress, it can become, people can vacillate between these three states, and it really can affect their everyday function. So then we want to talk more. So I gave before a couple indicators, what it looks like and feels like in the body. I want to talk more about the somatic effects of stress on the body. So these are the physical symptoms we feel in our bodies when we're stressed. So it's gonna feel like your heart rate is increasing, your palms are getting sweaty, you're gonna have potentially shortness of breath, feeling a headache, stomach ache, tightness of chest, clenched jaw, muscle tension, other areas of the body. Can anyone think of any other like side effects, symptoms they get, somatic responses when they have stress, when they're in stress? High blood pressure, yeah. Yep, absolutely. And for some people, they can feel when that blood pressure is elevating. I know for myself, when my blood pressure is elevating, when I'm in high stress, I start to get a really bad headache and it's onset very quickly. And I know from experience now that that's an indicator that my blood pressure it's really getting up there. So this is a really small list. We'll go through some more examples of this, but these are some of the really common ones. So then we want to also look at and consider, what does stress do to the body? And this is really when we're talking about chronic stress. So chronic stress can increase your chances of cardiac event. So someone just mentioned blood pressure. If we're under chronic stress, our blood pressure typically is going to become elevated, which is one of those things that's going to increase our risk of cardiac event. It can cause increases to our cortisol levels in the body, which can lead to weight gain, predominantly in the belly area, exhaustion, appetite increase, or other symptoms. An appetite change is definitely an indicator of stress, either decreased appetite, like we don't feel hunger, or increased appetite because it's something that's comforting to us. Chronic stress can also lead to hair loss. It can lower our immune function. It can impact our sleep, either hard time falling asleep or hard time staying asleep. Some people get night terrors and nightmares when they're under a lot of stress, as their subconscious mind is trying to process things. Those dreams that we have are our brain trying to process through things. And so if we're under a lot of stress, then our brain might be bringing more dreams to us than we would typically have, which can affect our sleep or disturb our sleep. And then when we aren't getting good quality sleep, having good sleep hygiene, that has a whole other host of negative side effects. And then chronic stress can also lead to or worsening mood disorders, for example, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, things like that. So one thing, oh, we've got a comment here. Okay, one person shared they've been experiencing prickling on their hands with high amounts of stress. Yeah, that's another one of those, what we call those somatic experiences. So people can experience numbness and tingling in their face, across their scalp, in their hands, any of their extremities. It's a somatic response to stress. Another one is muscle twitching. That's another indicator of being under heavy stress. Like if you ever had like your eyebrow twitch or your knee or different body parts, it's a similar effect. So it's important to pay attention to those indicators. That's your body's response, and then trying to connect it to an emotion. So having emotional intelligence, being able to connect that somatic response to emotions, is being able to identify the cues and clues your body is giving you about what emotions you're experiencing and putting a name to them, and as well as the ability to communicate these feelings to others and in a clear and effective way, interpreting other people's emotions, and being motivated to overcome difficult emotions. So increasing self-awareness is a great great starting point in working towards emotional intelligence. So most adults can list on average about 6 emotions, but there's dozens and dozens of emotions. I love this emotion wheel because it connects emotions to body experiences. So these are what we call our root emotions: anger, fear, surprise, happy, sad, disgust. And then we have more specific emotions that stem from that. And then what does it look like and feel like in the body? So if we look at anger and then hurt, it can look like lip trembles, or insecure can be limping, hiding, hot, scowling. Mad can be loud words, just speaking more loudly. Feeling flushed, heart racing. Aggressive can be clenching either the hands or the jaw or the toes. Any muscles really. Irritated can lead to headache. Distant can be like that, those butterflies in the stomach, gut turning. Feeling critical or like you're being criticized can be feeling hot or lip curled, when people like purse their lips. So these are all these different somatic responses that are associated with those emotions. And so it can be helpful when you're experiencing stress to do a body scan and feel into your body of, okay, where am I feeling this? What is it feeling like? Like, is my lip trembling? Are my hands tingling? And really getting or not comfortable, but clear with what sensations you're having, and then trying to put an emotion to that. And so that's how we're starting that process of really building our emotional intelligence, becoming aware of our own emotions. A lot of adults weren't taught how to become aware of our emotions. And so this is a great way to start to learn yourself, to make those connections. And then starting to recognize in others, like if you have kids, looking for, a lot of times kids can't say how they're feeling. We have to teach them. And so looking for these indicators in their body and then helping connect an emotion to it. And then we can do the same thing with our partners, with friends, people we work with, starting to interpret other people's emotions, and then being motivated to overcome difficult emotions, which involves a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight, and really starting to engage in some active, effective communication. So, yeah, this is a really, really great tool to help make those connections, to have pinned up on your fridge somewhere in your bathroom. So then what do we do when we have these stressful events? Everyone experiences stress, and there's times in our life where we're experiencing a significant amount of stress that is potentially not within our control, and we need to have a plan. And so here's some different examples of when we come up with a plan for something that's coming so that we're as prepared as we can be to handle it. So if someone is pregnant and they know they're going to deliver a baby, oftentimes they come up with a birthing plan. It's a very, very detailed, very well thought through for a lot of different circumstances. If a child has an individualized education plan, an IEP, or a 504 plan in school, there's goals and there's very specific accommodations and steps that need to be taken to support the child in the school setting. And so another example of a plan would be if someone's put on a performance improvement plan at work. So we're identifying what's the problem, the goal, what needs to happen, how do we measure it, and then what's the consequences if there isn't follow through. So each of these documents are great examples of when we're really laying out what to do to try to avoid things going wrong if we can. So that's what we're going to do tonight, come up with a plan. I'm going to teach you how to come up with a plan. So we're going to do this from the model of using a wellness wheel, and Christina emailed out to everybody your own template of a wellness wheel. So there's 8 different segments of your wellness wheel, and each area, it's important to have a good amount of resourcing, and if we don't, our wheel becomes unbalanced, and that's when we start to seemingly feel wobbly or off balance. And so we're going to walk through how to try to implement a plan strategically to make our wheel as balanced as possible. And we really want to, when we're under stress, we want to be able to pull from as many different resources as possible. And so it's important to have several things in each area. Um, because what you feel like doing one day, what's possible and realistic to do one day, may not another. And so having a really solid list is going to be really helpful for you. And something to think about is like when you're really dysregulated, like, um, a really disturbing thing happens. Like, let's say you got in a fight with your partner, and then your mom calls and wants to have a conversation with you. Like, you're probably not going to be in the best space to have a conversation, or if you need to all of a sudden make a really important decision, it's going to be a lot harder when you're in that really elevated space, when you're really activated. And so by having a plan ahead of time, when you're in that activated space, you're going to be able to pull it out and say, when you're not able to think as logically, to look at this piece of paper and say, okay, which thing is going to be helpful for me right now? So the first segment we're going to look at is spiritual wellness, and spirituality is different than religion. When we're thinking about our spiritual wellness, we are talking about meditation, using affirmations, mindfulness, connecting to nature, yoga, prayer, and or gratitude. When we are in chronic states of stress, it can be easier for our thought process to become negative, especially if we are ruminating or hyper focusing on the stressor or the triggers, whatever it is that's activating us. And so having a daily gratitude practice and affirmations can help rewire those thought patterns. This is called neuroplasticity. Our mind has the most neuroplasticity the first hour after we wake, so this is a good time to practice affirmations and gratitude practices. So neuroplasticity is how you can literally rewire your brain thought pattern. And so you can think of it like, um, if you have a field and a deer keeps walking from one end of the field to the river at the other end of the field, they walk back and forth. They continue to use that same path, which animals do. They do use the same paths for traveling through the mountains and the forest and all that. Eventually you start to see a trail in the meadow, in the forest, wherever it is they're traveling back and forth. And so we can do that same thing in our brain. And we have the highest ability to change that thought pattern that first hour you're awake. So YouTube is a great resource for this. Going to type in something like morning affirmations for positivity, or morning affirmations for financial abundance, whatever that focus area you want to be. Typically, those recordings on YouTube are just like 10 or 11 minutes. And so listening to that as you're getting ready in the morning, what I like to do is what's called habit stacking. So if you brush your teeth every single morning, and then you wash your face, then you put on your makeup, or you work out every morning, you're going to plug in this change you want to make into something you're already doing to remind your brain, okay, this is where I want to build this into my day. So, um, when we're under that chronic stress and our mind just can't get off of that thought process, those patterns, this is a really great way to try to retrain our brain and focus on something else. And this can also be considered a meditative practice. These recordings that are on YouTube, and you can also find them on apps like Calm is a great app that has these. It's very meditative, the way that they're talking, and it's repetition. And so, um, yeah, so that's a piece of the spirituality, adding that in. And then mindfulness can help keep your mind from wandering off and ruminating or hyper focusing. It's another great tool for that. So the practice of mindfulness is really just thinking about exactly what you're doing in that moment. A lot of people struggle with that, with their mind wandering. And so one thing you can think of to help you stay in that practice of mindfulness is focusing on your five senses. So if you're sitting there or standing there washing the dishes, for example, what am I seeing in front of me? What am I smelling? What am I hearing around me? What does my mouth taste like? And what am I feeling right now? So your thoughts are on exactly what you're doing in that moment. Naturally, your mind is going to wander, and you're just going to notice my mind wandered. That's okay. And then bring your thoughts right back to the washing your dishes. Um, And this sounds like a very simple practice that wouldn't create much of an effect. But if you're bringing your mind away from that constant worry and stressful thoughts, even if you're only making 30 minutes a day of a difference, that is going to have an impact on your nervous system and your ability to get out of that fight or flight. Next, we want to look at our social wellness. So this is an area the last couple years, a lot of research has been done that a lot of people are really struggling with connectivity, feeling connected. A lot of people report feeling just a lot of social isolation. And so being really intentional about building this area up, if this is something, an area that you notice you're struggling with. So some examples would be join a group that helps you reduce stress. And I want to emphasize the reduce stress because I know some groups are not super helpful. It's just a lot of complaining and not positivity. So you want to find something that is going to reduce that stress rather than have that increasing your blood pressure effect. Being really intentional about connecting with a friend or family member, exploring hobbies, groups that have hobbies you enjoy doing or want to try, and then being aware of your own impact on others and connecting to your community. So feeling like you're part of a community or making a positive change in the world can have a real positive effect on offsetting stress and improving your overall mood. Being mindful of focusing on groups and activities that will have positive interactions. So maybe consider if you enjoy gardening, joining a garden club or gardening group, and maybe that gardening group does like plant swaps. Looking for meetup groups in your area based on your interest, joining a booster club at your kid's school if you're a parent, volunteering for an organization that is meaningful to you. Think of things that have made a positive impact on your life that you would want to give back to. So the barrier a lot of people face with this one is they don't have the time. They really don't feel like they have the time. And I'm sure if you reach out to organizations that are of interest to you and just give them like that cap of like, I have an hour a month and I can only support from home. What can I do to help? And they will have something for you to do to help. Um, and so oftentimes by giving back, a lot of people just feel this sense of accomplishment, this sense of connectivity, this sense of just real joy from doing something positive for their community. So does anyone have any thoughts or examples on things in their community they would like to get involved in? I just gave one example of like the gardening, or I guess the booster club, I gave that one too. You'd really want to reflect on like what feels good for you. Like trying to think of another example. Like if you really enjoy knitting, like there's knitting story time, things like that. Uh, the next segment we want to focus on is physical wellness. So flexibility, strength, exercise, sleep, nutrition, medical care, expand your provider list, have a list before one is needed. So I'm referring to like counseling, psychiatry, just having those providers picked out, not necessarily because you need to start one right now, but if you do need one, to have someone identified or a few people chosen. When physical movement is not a regular part of your practice, it can be difficult to add it in. Consider using mindfulness and affirmations to be more successful. So thoughts like, my older self would be grateful so I can move better later on, or 10 minutes makes a difference for my wellness. So I know that as I've watched my parents age and their ability really decline in their physical mobility, that's a huge motivator for me. So when I really don't feel like moving my body, I will tell myself like my 70-year-old self will thank me for this. And no matter how tired I am, I will have the thought of like just do 10 minutes. And usually once I get going, I can go beyond the 10 minutes, but just trying to commit to something that feels achievable, because something is better than nothing. And we live in a culture that's very much all or nothing. We have to be exercising 5 days a week to make a difference. We have to be doing an hour. And that's simply not true. Like we really just, the point is to be moving our bodies. Um, Someone said I read in Spanish at the school or library for kids to preserve their native language. I love that. That's a beautiful way of giving to the community and helping create connectedness in the community. I'm sure those kids really appreciated that and their parents. Someone said I volunteer at my daughter's classroom. I'm part of an adult roller skate club in Marysville on Wednesdays. So fun. Yes, I'd like to join. Put it in the comments, please. I love that. Yeah, those are great examples of creating connection and um, connecting to heritage, connecting to youth, like whatever your motivator is really what's going to get you out there. So being clear about that. Thank you for sharing those. So again, thinking of ways to habit stack to make physical wellness feel successful. So well, you don't see my face right now, but I literally have workout bands at my desk. So if I'm sitting in long meetings, I'll slide that on and just get some exercise in while I'm sitting there, having dumbbells at your desk, or even in the kitchen while you're standing there waiting for something to cook, just, like 3 reps of 12, like you got it done. Having a chosen provider for as needed for things like counseling and psychiatry, I mentioned that earlier. It can be really challenging to find providers in your area for counseling right now. And so by doing it now, when you're not in like duress, being proactive instead of needing to be reactive can be hugely helpful. Um, and then where I recommend always looking is Psychology Today, because you can add in the filters of what insurance they take, if you have a gender preference, what their specialty is. Like there's so many filters you can add in. And because I'm a counselor, I'm in a lot of different groups, and I know that there's always counselors that have openings. It's just a matter of finding where they're at. And you can always feel free to reach out to me if you're looking for a counselor. If we don't have openings, I always like to help people connect them to the community. So schedule one day. Another thing to consider for your physical wellness is schedule one day to sit down and get important medical dental appointments scheduled, even if it's months out, using affirmations like, I'm doing a great job taking steps to keep myself healthy. So like maybe twice a year, like January 5th and July 5th, you sit down to make sure you're thoughtful about, do I have my physical? Do I have my dental appointments? If you have like a cardiac issue, do you have that? Whatever the thing is, just really creating that time and space for yourself. One thing a lot of people do is they push their needs to the back. A lot of times parents will do this, and then we're needing to be reactive instead of proactive. And then using those affirmations while you're doing these things for yourself is really important for creating that internal thought process around really taking care of yourself and using really self-care language. And then we want to look at occupational wellness. So at work, do we have good stress management? Do we have good work-life balance? We're not working when you're off work, taking time off for yourself, practicing mindfulness on lunch breaks, professional development that's enriching and fulfilling to you, and taking FMLA leave if and when necessary. This is a really hard one for a lot of people because our culture is very driven to go, 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 go. There's a lot of glamorizing of how busy people are and how much they work, especially when people feel like they have to prove themselves. And this is really important for wellness. A lot of people's chronic stress stems from work, and work is where a lot of people spend the most amount of time. So if you have any barriers that are coming up in your mind, I would love to hear what they are for why you can't accomplish these things. And then how much do you think your personality type and learning styles plays a role at work? So your personality type plays a huge role in how well you're feeling, you're able to communicate, you're feeling heard, your learning style. So if your learning style best is auditory processing, but the place that you work at, most communication is done with email, that might create this constant sense of angst or anxiety. And so really learning what those learning styles are, your personality types with people you work closely with can help offset some of that stress interpersonally within an agency. And this is not my pictorial, it's from these people X2. But I thought it was great to share again because work is such a high source of stress for so many people. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs are looking at what are basic human needs, and then where do they go from that foundation of basic needs. And this is interesting because it's shifting it into hierarchy of needs at your place of employment. And so if someone's just in survival mode at work, they're only here for the money, they're leaving when they can, they're not satisfied with work, work doesn't excite them, they're watching the clock and just can't wait to get out of there. And then if it's not like total survival mode, they're doing it just for security. They don't really like their job. They're okay with it, but they're always looking for other job opportunities. They're not interested in working more than they have to. They're calling out of work a lot. And then someone who's in the belonging phase of work, they might be able to be enticed, but they're okay at their job. But there's no opportunities really for them to grow and develop more. They know they're part of something bigger, but they don't feel like they're being fully realized in their potential. And then if we're at this place, they're engaged. They feel like they're an important part of the business, important part of the work. They're busy and they enjoy it. There's going to be higher stress at this level, but it's that good stress. And so they're rewarded with that stress. Um, they feel achieved, accomplished, and looking forward to what's next. And then this highest place, self-actualization, is what we all hope for, right? Like you love what you do, you think you're making a difference in the world, you're inspiring others to do their best, and you know, your workplace is a positive part of your life. And so if you are at your work is where you spend the majority of your time and you're down here, chances are your stress is going to be pretty chronic, right? So be thinking about how you can apply these different segments of the wellness wheel to either shift your mindset and shift how you're taking care of yourself in that stressful environment if you can't leave your career, or considering, you know, what is filling to me, maybe it's time for a career move. And then the next section of our wellness wheel is going to be intellectual wellness. So learning new things, reading, listening to podcasts, traveling, taking trainings, webinars like this one, journaling, playing games, joining groups based on areas of interest. So I know like at my kids' high school, they have like game club, you know, they have a fishing club where my kids really get to engage with others and learn new things. Consider what would be a good distraction for you. So for some people, a good distraction intellectually is going to be really critical thinking. For some people, it's going to be fictional work where it's just total fantasy. Listening to a podcast, it could be something about parenting. If you're a parent, it could be about career development, outdoor adventures, comedy, health and fitness, whatever is going to be that good distraction for you that is helping you feel like you're thinking critically and intellectually. iTunes and Spotify are great apps. And then Libby is a library in Snohomish County that allows us to check out books for free, both audio and books to read. Saw a comment here. Great pictorial can be a difficult balance if employee and admin are not in alignment. I just changed jobs for this reason. I fortunately have been able to change as others may not have this option. Yeah, good for you for recognizing that and making that change. And you're right, not everyone is in a position where they can change. And so that's where it's really crucial. We have to balance this wellness wheel. And, you know, part of that emotional intelligence is becoming aware of how is this affecting me? And then how do you release that? You know, using these different tools we're talking about tonight to just release that stress. So, and there are even jobs, like my husband is a firefighter and he loves his career and he sees really hard stuff. And so people in that position, like first responders, they have to find tools to get past those difficult parts of the job. So sometimes it's not difficult because you're not fulfilled in your career. Sometimes it's because it is a hard job. And either way, like we need to have that emotional intelligence to be able to be responsible for our emotions and have those coping strategies, those coping tools to be able to manage and offset that stress if you can't or don't want to leave that career or that job. Um, and then we want to look at financial wellness. So if we consider Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like foundationally, the bare bones minimum is like we need to be financially secure to feel safe. We need to be able to pay our bills. We need to be able to eat food, have access to food and shelter and water. And so when financial wellness is not there, that can be a huge stressor. So looking for ways you can create emergency savings, having a family budget that everyone is accountable to and aware of, evaluating your debt to income ratio, tracking your credit score. Credit Karma is a great app for this. Another good app is Mint. Both of those apps can help you track where your money is going. The Mint can help categorize your money. Like if you just don't know where to begin, there's some great apps out there. There's some great worksheets out there to really help, strengthen this area. And so a lot of times when people have certain areas where they don't, that's a source of the stress. It feels so overwhelming. They feel like they can't even take those small steps. And so identifying first, like, is this the category that's causing me stress? And then just really breaking it down like one step at a time, and then systematically setting aside time to work on that thing. A lot of times, what feels achievable is just systematically creating change and scheduling time like you would schedule an appointment. Like, okay, I'm going to schedule 3 to 4:30 on this day to get this app to connect it to my bank account so I can see where I'm spending and where I can cut expenses. Just having it scheduled like that can be a huge help. Um, One idea is to have a family goal activity with finances. Maybe like you fill up a large mason jar with change and $1 bills. The whole family over time, once it's full, like you have some celebration together. Like you go on a vacation together or you, whatever it might look like, but making it a family activity. And then environmental wellness. So spending time in nature, being mindful of your impact on the environment, being aware of your surroundings and how it makes you feel. Do you have a safe space in your home for your mind to connect to yourself? And then thinking about what does a safe space in your home look like? Well, it's a place in your home where you can go and you don't feel overwhelmed. You don't feel um, overstimulated. There isn't like a ton going on. It's quiet. It's whatever you need it to feel like to feel in a place where you can just take some deep breaths and calm yourself. So I like to use my five senses for this. So in my home, it's my bedroom. So I have textures that are really comforting to me. I like velvet. I like teal. I like a burnt yellow color. I have colors in there that are really soothing to me. I have plants in there. Having things that appeal to all five of your senses. And then emotional wellness. So again, working on your emotional intelligence, becoming aware of your somatic response in the body, and knowing when you need more support with that, taking time for self-care, managing your stress, seeking therapy as needed, practicing gratitude with intention, and becoming curious how you react to things, how will you engage in your interpersonal relationships, learning about attachment styles. Everyone has an attachment style that's rooted in the primary relationships they or caregivers they had as a child and how that affects your function. And then also learning about Gottman's four horsemen, which are contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling, and criticism. And if those play a role in how you engage and interact in your interpersonal relationships. learning your personality type and how that plays a role in your engagement with others at work and at home, and what your learning style is. So this one also ties into intellectual wellness, um, but really just having a lot of curiosity around your function and how are you coming to relationships and what's your role there. So personalities 17, I think, is where you can do the Myers-Briggs personality test, which is my favorite. It's so insightful knowing your Myers-Briggs. And we're just scratching the surface here. Like this is only a, Christina, this is only till 7 o'clock, right? I think so. Like I'm covering so much stuff. This is just getting you as much as I can, as quickly as I can. Okay, so those are all the segments of the wellness wheel, and then we want to look at self-soothing versus self-care, because if you're someone that has that stress right now, we want to be able to support that. So first we look at self-soothing. That's specifically things you can do at the time of distress. So it's like right now, short term, if you're in that fight or flight space right now. So doing breath work, typing or taking deep breaths, habit stacking, we're building into something you're already doing. Like you'll tell yourself, okay, at every red light, I'm going to take a deep breath. Using aromatherapy or comforting smells. A lot of people have smells associated with a person, a place, a thing. So having those smells that are comforting to you. The smell of baking bread reminds me of my grandmother. It's a very comforting smell to me, for example. So it doesn't have to necessarily be like essential oils or a candle. Taking a bath, spending time with pets. Pets, research shows, really do help regulate our nervous system. So if you have a cat or a dog or a horse or a cow, that really can support you. Cooking, playing music, exercise, having time with friends are good go-tos like in that moment. Sending a thank you to someone, so thinking outside of yourself, playing a game or a puzzle to distract you. And then self-care, that's more of that long-term behavior change that we're doing with intention to support ourselves. So working on healthy sleep habits, getting enough sleep, working on a healthy diet to fuel your body so you feel like your best self, spending time with friends, that can go on both lists. Time in nature can go on both lists, and joining support groups. Some others are joining an activity or club, practicing gratitude, declaring your space, learning a new skill, prioritizing meaningful connections. And so you can see how like the self-soothing and self-care things you can do fit into all sections of that wellness wheel, right? Which is why it's important to really have that wheel completed for you specifically. So when you're in that space of I need to self-soothe, you can easily access it. But then also you can look at those self-care activities that over time you want to strengthen like a muscle. So building blocks for success. Um, some important things to just try to implement right off the bat is going to be having those morning gratitude affirmations. Again, it's really changing that neuroplasticity. And so I was wrong. This goes until 7:30. Um, that is something you can do immediately and does really create change. It helps rewire those neurons. It helps rewire the brain to change that thought pattern. Implementing ceremonial practices like tea, meditation, deep breathing, like I said, at the stoplight or before bed, if you just commit to like when you lay down, just doing 10 really deep breaths or first thing in the morning, and really creating this belief system that you can create calm moments in your life. So practice of drinking tea, that can be meditative. If you're using mindfulness of like, I'm holding the cup in my hand, you're getting in touch with all five of your senses. You're paying attention to how it feels when it's in your mouth. It's warm. It tastes like peppermint. How does it feel going down your throat? Like just really paying attention to what is that experience of the tea? What is that experience of the deep breathing? Do you notice that it calms your body down? Do you notice that your heartbeat slows down a little bit? and really using that affirmation that I can create calm moments in your life. A lot of time when we're under high stress or chronic stress, there can become this belief system that I don't have control of my life. My life feels completely out of control, which it does feel that way. And by immediately implementing some of these things, we can create some sense of control. These are things we can control in our life. And then again, habit stacking to help you be more successful with implementing these things right away. And then we want to reframe how you view your everyday acts. So when you are eating a piece of fruit, you're eating a vegetable, you're eating healthy foods, you're having that mindful thought of, I'm fueling my body, I'm giving my body what it needs to get through the day as best I can. When you're making a choice to go to bed at 10 o'clock instead of staying up until midnight, you're having that conscious thought of, I'm improving my sleep hygiene so that I can better combat my day. If you're putting on clothes that make you feel good, you're having that thought of, I'm going to wear something that's going to make me feel more confident today because I've been feeling like garbage. I'm going to wear something that makes me feel pretty today because I just feel really unattractive because I'm so sad all the time. So we're being very intentional with the thoughts and intentions behind those actions that we're pulling from our wellness wheel. And then feeling like we're taking responsibility for our emotions. So by improving your emotional intelligence, um, adding in those gratitude affirmations in the morning, we're really changing those thought patterns and becoming more emotionally intelligent. And again, that's going to create that sense of empowerment. Um, So before we move on, thinking of all the different segments, can anyone think of any that I didn't list that you might want to add into any of the sections? Just to give other people some ideas. We'll come back to the wellness wheel when we're done here. Um, some food for thought. We are in a society where there's constant social media that's bombarding us with the latest trends of what we need to do to feel good, to be healthy, and to look good. Do any of these sound familiar? Mouth taping, red light therapy, blue light blockers, cold plunges, sound baths, hyaluronic acid, blocking people out of your life, no alcohol, no caffeine, vegan, gluten-free, high protein, etc., etc., etc. Would love to know if you can think of any other like really trendy things. That's not to say that these things aren't bad for you. And when we're constantly being bombarded with um, what all these influencers think we need to do to take care of ourselves, it can feel really hard to stay on track with what we know works for us and to start any kind of um, new step to really take care of ourselves to manage that stress. So to have balance, you need to first have those foundational needs met, which is income, security, safety, housing, secure employment, access to food, secure attachment, and co-regulation with your primary people in your life. Um, this is where it's really helpful to have an understanding of your attachment styles because it really impacts how you respond to the people that you live with, including your own kids, responds to coworkers, responds to criticism, really having a good understanding of what that looks like. And because also it can help you identify like, oh gosh, it's not by coincidence that I always feel like the victim. It's actually because I have an insecure attachment style, and these are things I can do to combat that. And so for some people, that stress can come from these patterns that we're seeing in our lives, but we don't know why we keep seeing them. And so getting clear on, are there patterns because of some areas that you just need to work on and become aware of yourself? And then when I say co-regulation with others, what that looks like is when you're interacting with your primary partner, your kids, they're not activating you all the time. You are responsible for your emotions. You're able to regulate your emotions. You're able to be regulated in conversation and communication with those partners or your kids or whoever you live with. Um, because you're in a state of self-actualization, you're grounded, you're very present in your body. And when we are lacking that emotional awareness and we have that constant dysregulation because we're in chronic fight or flight or fawn or freeze, those are indicators that we're not regulated and we need to work on our nervous systems using all of these tools we've been talking about. And then, oh, someone left a comment. There's so much stress caused by needing to be perfect based on other stances on what perfection means. Hard to deal with when dealing with life stresses in general. Yes, I know. That's why I brought this up. There's always what does looking good feel like, or what does looking good look like according to society? What does looking good feel like according to society? What do you have to do to accomplish that? Like, well, if you're not doing cold plunges, you're not doing it right. You're not taking care of your health, I mean, there's just such high expectations of what we should be doing. And so again, on your wellness wheel, getting really clear on what you know to be true for you that is going to work for you. Um, and over time, if you want to, write it in pencil and you go start the mouth taping and you find, wow, I actually wake up feeling a lot better. I feel like I do get better quality sleep. Great. Put that into the physical wellness part of your wheel. That's something you can do to take care of your sleep hygiene. But to start, we want to write down things that we know to be true for us. I know for me, I tend to do best when I eat a pretty vegan-based diet. I don't love doing that, but I know that that's what feels best for me. If I've never tried a vegan diet, I'm not going to write that down because I don't know that to be true for myself. I know that I will not be running. Like that's not something I want to do or I will do. So I'm not going to even bother writing that down. You're going to write down things that you think you can do and accomplish, and we want things that you can implement realistically and successfully. So if you're going throughout your day and you pull out your wheel, what I want you to be able to do is say, okay, I'm feeling stressed and that part of the wellness wheel feels too overwhelming, but this part I feel like I can do. I feel like I can go to my sanctuary, my bedroom, light a candle, and listen to some soft music. I feel like that's achievable today. Having that thought process of I'm offsetting my stress, I'm taking care of myself. If it feels achievable to you to listen to a podcast or getting ready in the morning, like that's important. That's creating change. And then we want to weave in these other areas of the wheel with intentionality, focusing on what is in our own personalized wellness wheel, not what is trending. Like I just mentioned, the value of coming up with a plan is that you have a clear call to action for when you're under high stress and also to prevent stress from building over time. And so, um, again, these are those. This is going to be the immediate action. And then we're going to add in things that feel achievable throughout the day. And then for future support, this is my website. Again, we do parenting classes online and in home. We do postpartum support and counseling. And then I'm doing a workshop on the 28th on how to rediscover yourself. That is specifically for women who have just kind of lost themselves over the years because of kids or career or whatever, and how to get back in touch with yourself. So that's there. But what I want to do is go back to each of the, I wish I would have done this from the beginning. Um, I would love to hear other ideas people have from each section, if you came up with any that I didn't list. So the spiritual wellness, and connecting to nature is one here because people can, a lot of times just feel like their mind goes blank on a hike in nature or when they're on a beach. They just really feel like very grounded and present. Or our social wellness, if anyone had any ideas on that. Some people mentioned some about that one actually, like the reading in Spanish to the kids and helping in the classroom. Journaling, yeah, that would be a great one for spiritual. And I think of some of the other ones. If anyone has any other ideas for physical wellness, I'm 43, and what I've learned once you get into your 40s and beyond for women is the importance of muscle training. So lifting more weights. So, that's another piece of it is like being mindful of what's best for your body based on your age. And that can be part of that affirmation too, of like, I'm doing what's best for my age and taking care of my body. But yoga could be added into this one. If anyone had any ideas for occupational wellness, like other things that you find really helpful, or intellectual wellness, if anyone had any other things they thought would be helpful, or like great podcasts or books that you have enjoyed. Um, like there's the self-help section of books. Or other tips for financial wellness, environmental wellness. Something my mom used to do is she would, whenever they would do um salmon restoration projects in the area, she would just like go volunteer for a day. Nature was important to her, and so that's something that she would go do. Like once a year, she would go do it. Someone said I enjoy puzzle books, like crosswords and search words. Easy distraction. Yeah, and those are actually really good for your cognitive function. Really good for your cognitive function. I was gonna so like Wordle is one. There's like some apps that have some of those different games that I know people do just to keep that cognitive function up. And then if anyone had any other ideas for emotional wellness, things that have worked for you. One thing I didn't mention here is like, going to couples counseling if you have a partner and you just want to improve things in that area. Um, yeah. Any questions from anyone? I'm curious if this was surprising, the difference between self-soothing and self-care. Um, Christina asked, would you consider practicing a new skill, self-soothing or self-care? Self it could be both. That's one that could be considered both. If you're doing it at that time where you're dysregulated to take your mind off of whatever that thing is, it can be self-soothing. Um, which can be really hard. Like, let's say you sign up for a canning class at Stilly Valley. I don't know if you do canning classes, but like, let's say you signed up for it, and then when the time comes, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like I can go because um this really big thing is going on. I just feel too overwhelmed. But then like you force yourself to go because what else are you going to do but sit home and worry? And you find that for a couple hours of your day, you were not thinking about that stressful thing. And then over time, if that's something that is good to balance out your wheel, to be doing events, hobbies in the community, then it becomes self-care if it's done long term. Any other questions? Someone said self-soothing is new for me. I play music on the radio or Spotify and it helps me calm my day. Good. I'm glad you found that, and I hope you continue to find more things that are self-soothing. Music is very calming to a lot of people, and if you have kids, that's a great strategy with kids as well, to just turn the music on and see how it calms them down, or turn some music on and start either some really calming music or some music you can start dancing to, like moving your body is really good for just getting some of that stress out, like intentionally like shaking your arms out and moving them here like this and moving your hips and your waist. Yeah. And also keeping in mind those thought patterns you're going to have of I'm doing something to take care of my mind right now. I'm doing a self-soothing activity. Like, really talk to yourself about the intention behind what you're doing to change those thought patterns to feel more in control of whatever the stressful event is and those potentially unhealthy thought patterns you started to create. Because when we are in chronic stress, our thought pattern can become unintentionally very negative. So trying to shift that.
While we wait for any more questions or comments to come in, I just wanted to let you guys know, if you're joining us live today, that as you leave the webinar, there will be a quick 6-question survey that will appear on your screen. We'd love it if you could take a minute to fill that out. Let us know what you thought of the class. And if you have any feedback or suggestions for future classes. I also wanted to let you guys know that we do have another class with Camille coming up next Monday. I think that's April 28th. And so I will send out information on that class with the recording tomorrow morning for anyone who is interested in registering.
Someone said, I appreciate this session being offered today. Thank you. So much stress in our personal lives, and good to know we're not alone. Also dealing with nationally imposed stresses. Yeah, I wasn't going to bring up the obvious. Like, there are so many big changes happening in our country, no matter what your beliefs are. That's a fact for everybody, right? And it is imposed on all of us. There's no escaping it. And so we really do need to take responsibility for what we can, which is our own emotions, how we're moving through these spaces, and taking care of ourselves in the process is really critical, rather than feeling like a victim, like there's nothing I can do, which a lot of us do feel that way right now. We can control how we're responding to things. Someone said, are you sending the slides out? My therapist is helping me practice daily affirmations without the pressure of measurement, but rather to create healing self-talk. I can send the slides to Christina, absolutely. I love that your therapist is helping you practice daily affirmations. Yeah, and I just really encourage you to practice that mindfulness when you're doing like every action you're doing throughout the day. Think about, how is this serving me? What is this doing for me? And have that thought process of I'm eating a cucumber and that's healthy for my body. I'm taking care of my body. boom, that's your health part of your physical part of your wellness wheel that you've checked for the day. Or whatever you're doing, just look for that intentionality behind it and how it's taking care of your body. Even if it's something you're doing every day, looking at it through the lens of you're taking care of yourself. Any other questions or comments?
Well, if anyone has any other questions that come up later on, I would be happy to pass those forward to Camille. And like I said, I will be sending out the recording and possibly the slides and information on the next class in an email tomorrow morning. And so I hope that you guys enjoyed tonight. I hope to see some of you at our next class on Monday.
Me too. Looking forward to it. Christina, I'll try to get you those slides tonight. It'll be difficult to format it, so I can email them. I'll see if I can maybe like share a link or something like that.
Okay, no worries. If it's a few days, then I'm sure that everyone will be happy to have them eventually. So
Okay.
no rush.
Okay.
Great. Well, you guys have a good night. And Camille, thank you again. Wonderful presentation. And I will see you on Monday.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.